September 13, 1862. In pursuit of Robert E. Lee, General George McClellan leads the Union Army into Frederick, Maryland. Later that day, he is presented with a piece of paper found in a vacated rebel camp. It is Special Order 191, Robert E. Lee's secret plans. Upon receiving the secret plans, McClellan stated, "Here is a paper with which if I cannot whip Bobby Lee, I will be willing to go home." Finding Robert E. Lee's secret operational plans was a needed advantage for the Union Army. Earlier in June and July 1862, Robert E. Lee successfully drove the Army of the Potomac from the Peninsula east of Richmond back into the sea during the 7 Days Campaign. Then the next month, August, Lee moved toward Washington and delivered a knockout punch to a second Union Army for a second time at Bull Run. Now Robert E. Lee had an even more dramatic plan. Instead of remaining on the defensive in Virginia, he crossed the Potomac River near Leesburg, Virginia, entering Union territory in Maryland. The Army of Northern Virginia is now in Frederick, Maryland in the first week of September 1862. There are many reasons why Lee has taken this gamble. One reason is strategic. He wants to pull pressure off Richmond. One reason is political. He wants to win on Union soil, which may convince Maryland residents to transfer loyalties to the South or convince European powers to side with the Confederacy. There is also a very practical concern. After months of heavy fighting, the countryside near Richmond is becoming barren. Tens of thousands of men have lived off the land, and the orchards and fields have become lean. Lee's men are hungry, and many have subsisted off apples and corn for weeks on end. 1 in 4 rebel soldiers who have smashed the United States Army and who are now walking across Virginia into Maryland do not have shoes. But McClellan has reorganized the Army of the Potomac faster than Lee anticipated, and McClellan is in pursuit from Washington. McClellan's gigantic army of some 90,000 men is at least twice the size of Lee's hungry and blistered army. McClellan arrives in Frederick on September 13th, just as the rebel army vacates. This is when Lee's secret plans are found. Lee's Special Order 191 reads, "The army will resume its march tomorrow, taking the Hagerstown road. General Jackson's command will form the advance, and after passing Middleton, with such portion as he may select, take the route towards Sharpsburg, cross the Potomac at the most convenient point, and by Friday morning take possession of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, capture as may be at Martinsburg, and intercept such as may attempt to escape from Harpers Ferry. General Longstreet's command will pursue the main road as far as Boonsboro, where it will halt with reserve supply and baggage trains of the Army. General McLaws, with his own division and that of General R.H. Anderson, will follow General Longstreet. In reaching Middleton, will take the route to Harper's Ferry, and by Friday morning possess himself of the Maryland Heights and endeavor to capture the enemy at Harper's Ferry and vicinity. General Walker, with his division, after accomplishing the object in which he is now engaged, will cross the Potomac at Cheek's Ford, ascend its right bank to Lovettsville, take possession of Loudon Heights, if practicable, by Friday morning. General Stuart will detach a squadron of cavalry to accompany the commands of Generals Longstreet, Jackson, and McLaws, and with the main body of the cavalry will cover the route of the army, bringing all stragglers that may have been left behind. The commands of Generals Jackson, McLaws, and Walker, after accomplishing the objects for which they have been detached, will serve the main body of the army at Boonsboro or Hagerstown. by command of General Robert E. Lee. McClellan now knows that Lee's army is divided. He will make a two-pronged attack. McClellan, with the main body of the army, will strike from Frederick to Boonsboro. There it will find and destroy Longstreet's corps. Franklin's corps, meanwhile, will strike from Buckystown to Harpers Ferry to end the rebel siege. Early the next morning, September 14th, the Union Army moves out. McClellan's main body hits rebels defending the gap over the South Mountain Ridge of the Appalachian Mountains. Further south, Franklin's corps hits rebel defenses at Crampton's Gap near Burkittsville, Maryland. The Battle of South Mountain has begun. 4 areas have simultaneous conflicts on September 14th. They are, from north to south, Turner's Gap, Fox's Gap, Crampton's Gap, and the rebel siege at Harpers Ferry. Action on this day stretches some 13 miles, and cannon fire from all regions will be heard at the other areas. This front stretches across 2 states. The Appalachian Mountain Gaps are in Union, Maryland, and Harpers Ferry in 1862 is located in western Virginia, which is in the process of breaking off from Virginia. West Virginia will be founded the next year. A closer look at this large theater shows the topography. The South Mountain Range is lined here. The arsenal at Harpers Ferry is located along a river junction. Crampton's Gap is a narrow break in the mountains. Turner's Gap in the north is a winding gap in the ridge. If McClellan can punch through Turner's Gap, he will catch Longstreet separated from Jackson. McClellan's giant army has the potential to isolate and destroy Longstreet's corps on this day. In the south, if Franklin's corps can get through Crampton's Gap and proceed a few miles to Harper's Ferry, he can sabotage Jackson's siege. Lee realizes how serious the situation is, and he recalls Longstreet from Hagerstown to Boonsboro. Let's take a closer look at the northern gaps, Turner and Fox's gaps. The Appalachian Mountain Ridge is forested in dark green. West of the ridge is Boonsboro. The National Pike, Route 40, cuts through Turner's Gap. A second road cuts through the mountains just to the south through Keedysville. Sharpsburg is just southwest, and Antietam Creek can be seen here highlighted to the west. Along the crest of the ridge on the south road is Fox's Gap. On the morning of September 14, there is just one rebel division under D.H. Hill holding this gap over the mountains. Longstreet's corps is still in Hagerstown to the north, and most of Hill's own division is in Boonsboro. Down the highway, approaching from the southeast, Hill could see the massive Army of the Potomac approaching like a giant leviathan. He later said, "I do not remember ever to have experienced a feeling of greater loneliness." McClellan's army approaches carefully, headed by Reno's corps. At the front is Cox's division, which follows the highway. Cox decides to take the flank of the ridge, knowing that the gap is likely defended. His columns make a left face and head up towards Fox's Gap. Garland's brigade stands to hold Fox's Gap against a whole division. At 9 a.m., the battle for an Appalachian Ridge commences. The 23rd Ohio, under future President Lieutenant Colonel Rutherford B. Hayes, highlighted here in yellow, moves on Garland's flank. Hayes is wounded, but the Ohio men break Garland's flank. By 11 a.m., the Federals control Fox's Gap. Cox advances toward Turner's Gap, but then Hill's brigade arrives on the crest just as Cox approaches. Heavy fighting commences between the two divisions along the crest of the ridge. While the fighting continues on the high ground, Longstreet's men are beginning to arrive from Hagerstown from the north. But to the southeast, Wilcox's division is making the approach to Fox's Gap. Cox has pushed backward toward Fox's Gap by noon. The back and forth continues, but by 2 p.m. Wilcox has crested the ridge and engaged. Though heavily outnumbered, Hill's rebels hold their own, hoping that Longstreet will arrive. The vanguard of Longstreet's corps is led by Hood's division. Hill has held out long enough for Hood to reinforce him. It is now 3:30 p.m., and the rebels still hold off Union advances, but numbers are going to take their toll. By late afternoon, the giant Union army is arriving in larger force along the pike. Hooker's corps moves right. By 4 p.m., a massive mouth opens up from below Turner's Gap, with Meade's division on the far right sweeping up the slope with Ricketts and Hatch's divisions. Gibbon's Iron Brigade strikes straight up the National Road toward Turner's Gap. As evening falls, the sheer force of the Union Army's size renders any further defense impracticable. Colquitt's brigade is able to hold off the Iron Brigade on the National Road, but the size of the Union advance is overpowering. During the night, Lee gives the order for the rebels to withdraw from the hill and pull west to Sharpsburg. All the while, the siege of Harper's Ferry continues. A closer look at the immediate area of Harper's Ferry shows how desperate the situation is for the North. A simple aerial image does not convey the dramatic cliff faces around Harper's Ferry. Here is a topographical look. The Potomac River is in blue. The Shenandoah River is in orange. Harper's Ferry is at the junction. To the northeast is Maryland Heights, which dominates the landscape, followed by Loudon Heights to the southeast. West of Harper's Ferry is a stretch called Bolivar Heights. These three high grounds command the area. Harper's Ferry is an important arsenal garrisoned by over 12,000 Union soldiers. However, the cliffs around it make this a trap. The Union garrison commander, Miles, holds Bolivar Heights west of town. However, as Lee's special orders planned, the rebels have successfully commanded the heights around the town, turning it into a trap for the defenders. McLaws has artillery on Maryland Heights, Walker has artillery on Loudon Heights, and Stonewall Jackson's corps is staring the Yankees in the face west of town. And Stonewall Jackson has a trick up his sleeve. On the evening of September 14, when battles are raging for Turner, Fox, and Crampton's Gaps, Jackson sent A.P. Hill around the craggy slopes in Harper's Ferry, flanking the Union defenders. Miles and the Union garrison wake up on September 15, completely surrounded. The rebel guns punish their position. Miles had been hoping and praying that McClellan would arrive and lift the siege, and he could hear fighting at Crampton's Gap just a few miles north. Franklin did take Crampton's Gap on September 14, but Franklin did not press on to Harper's Ferry after taking the Gap. Harper's Ferry falls to the Confederates. Over 12,000 Union soldiers surrender. It is the biggest surrender of United States forces until World War II. The rebels also secure thousands of rifles, shoes, and uniforms from the arsenal. Lee's gamble, as planned on his special orders, had succeeded in securing Harper's Ferry. The Battle of South Mountain and Harper's Ferry are bittersweet for both sides. The North succeeds in securing Turner, Fox, and Crampton's Gaps, but the South succeeded in taking Harper's Ferry. On September 15, the day after the Battle of South Mountain and the day Jackson took Harper's Ferry, Lee calls his divided forces to reassemble at Sharpsburg. At Sharpsburg, Lee binds together his tired, outnumbered, yet confident force. The rebels have the Potomac River to their back and Antietam Creek to their front. And this is how Sharpsburg becomes the stage for the bloodiest day in American history.